If realism has been the most important theory in international relations and history, there's a good argument that international liberalism has been the most influential paradigm in this country, at least since World War II. Let's start by taking a look at a few variants of international liberalism. Commercial liberalism argues either that capitalism leads to peace because countries are too busy making money to want to go to war, or more commonly, that free trade capitalism deters war because countries that are tied together by trade and exchange
have a huge incentive to maintain good relations. This was half-jokingly referred to as the McDonald's theory of liberalism by the influential columnist Thomas Friedman, who claimed that countries with consumer capitalism, represented here by fast food restaurants, would tend to be peaceful. Republican liberalism suggests that countries with elected governments are much less likely to go to war. They argue that when the general population has a strong influence on a country's governance, not wanting to go to war, the population will act as a brake against all but the most necessary wars. A slightly different variant of Republican liberalism is that at least democracies will not go to war with other democracies. It's fairly difficult to check the truth of this theory simply by looking at history, partly because there is no general consensus on exactly what a democracy is, and even more because it's really only in the last 3/4 of a century that there have been a large number of democracies, which leaves open the possibility that if these countries have been less likely to fight each other, that there could well be some other explanation.
I believe the war is over. It's over.
You'll have a chance to weigh in on all these theories in the discussion forums. The type of international liberalism in IR that we will spend the most time on is institutional liberalism. As we'll see, liberal institutionalists try to incorporate some of the assumptions and conclusions of realism. In some ways, the theory of institutional liberalism lagged behind and was inspired by real-world events and institutions like Woodrow Wilson's proposed League of Nations, the actual UN, the European Union. In the years following World War II, most observers of international relations understandably were concerned with security conflicts, having just lived through one of the bloodiest wars in history and living with the threat of nuclear attack. The preoccupation of most citizens was the fear that war would break out, and the paradigm that scholars tended to use to answer that question was realism. One international relations scholar, Robert Cohen, agreed that realism had useful insights, but he worried that its assumption that conflict was inevitable might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Cohen pointed out that there were important examples of cooperation between countries, and argued that realism didn't have a way of explaining it. If we could better understand how it was possible when countries did work together, we might be able to use that insight to find ways to encourage more cooperation. Drawing on the newly emergent economic discipline of industrial organization, Cohen saw imperfect information and market uncertainty caused markets to function imperfectly. Cohen hypothesized that lack of information, uncertainty, Mistrust prevented nations from working together, even when it would be in their mutual self-interest. We'll take a look at Cohen's proposed solution to this problem in part 2 of the video.